the Arabian Racehorse Podcast with Debbie Burton, Gary Caton and Stephen Molyneux.
Good morning and welcome to another edition of the Arabian Racing Podcast. I'm joined by Gary Quakewell. Morning, Gary.
Morning.
And by the recently released from quarantine, Stephen Molyneux.
Good morning, Debbie. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Today, we're just going to preview the Arabian Racehorse.com International Condition Stakes, which will be run tomorrow at Newbury. I think also, actually, before we go on, I'd like to say a special thank you to Pierce of Equine Record, who puts all these podcasts together. He's currently in Saratoga discussing their welfare program with the NRA out there. Of course, it was the Equine Record digital app, which Arrow embraced a lot sooner than a lot of other countries. And we were really a world leader, Arabian racing, for once in our lives. So thank you, Pierce, for that. If we now move forward to preview the race, it's at 4:25 tomorrow. I don't think there have been any changes in the race times. This obviously was previously one of the DR Dubai International Stakes preps. In various guises, it's either been one race or one run as two races separately for fillies as a Hatter prep. And then I think the last time it was run, there were two versions. The first version, which was run on the 25th of June. So technically, I guess this is the replacement sponsorship, as it were, for that race, was won by Al Kaiser, who, of course, he shows up today. He's now the highest rated, the highest rated UK trained Arabian at the moment. So what does everybody think? Stephen, handicapper.
Well, he's had the one run this season, hasn't he, where he finished an excellent second in handicap company. Handicaps are hopefully the best barometer of merit. He was second off a mark 106 then, when finishing well clear of the rest. And he's just proven to be a very progressive horse, hasn't he, right throughout his career. He's a 7-year-old now. He started off winning a handicap off 78. He's won a couple more handicaps since then, and this race, as you've already alluded to, back in 2019. So he's just a very likeable horse. I think he's one poor run, or maybe a couple of poor runs have come at Newbury. One of them in a conditions race, another the Premier Handicap back in 2018. But aside from that, he's just turned up and given his running pretty much every race that he's contested. And conditions are ideal, 10 furlongs. He won't mind what the ground does, whether it's soft or firm. He's won under an amateur. He's won under professionals. He's very hard to knock. He's got the race under his belt as well. So the ratings hopefully won't lie too much on this occasion. As you've said, he's the best horse currently trained in the UK, and hopefully, I'm sure James Owen will be hoping that this is a nice stepping stone to one of the group races later on, presumably Goodwood being on the agenda at the end of July, early August.
Gary?
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. Obviously, he's clear on the ratings, isn't he? Which sometimes, as Stephen will know from quite a lot of the Arabian racing and in Dubai, it doesn't always pan out like that. Let's put it that way. But he's the most solid sort of yardstick, isn't he? And yeah, I mean, he has won this race before, as you point out. That was a very pleasing seasonal reappearance, I thought. I should imagine this was probably the aim for him at the start of the season, wasn't it? His main first target, that run at Chelmsford, was a race that seemed to fit in quite well and was an ideal sort of prep for this, if you like. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of other Shadwell horses against him, including a few of his stable companions. A couple that are wearing different bits of headgear for the first time. Tufan was a bit disappointing, I thought, last time. Farha, who I think has often promised a lot more than we've seen on the track. And Jadeel, of course, who won on its most recent outing, on her most recent outing, rather, I should say, at Doncaster, obviously over a little bit further than this. So James has obviously got that quartet. You've got Phil with 4 as well. Lulwa, who probably on rating, I suppose, would just about be the main danger. And we haven't seen her yet this year. Obviously, she running the Derby on a racecourse debut last year, and managed to get off the market at Wolverhampton on a final start. the trip is ideal for her, to be perfectly honest. And the others that Phil runs, well, the Shadwell ones, Altar and Labois. I mean, Altar's got a good bit to find on the ratings, and Labois, well, we don't know a huge amount about. So yeah, it looks a match between Alcázar and Luwa strictly on the ratings. It wouldn't overly surprise me if Jadail and Farhar were to outrun their handicap mark, if you like, because in theory, I mean, I know they're getting £4 from Alcázar, but strictly on ratings, I mean, Farhar's got 1.5 stones to find, and Jadail just over 1 stone. So strictly speaking, they've got it, only getting £4 from that rival. They've got it all to do, really, haven't they? But it just wouldn't surprise me if one of those was to serve it up to the top one, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think Jadail, obviously, she's a bit less exposed. Actually, it's very hard to keep track of all these foreign races. I didn't think she'd actually run as many times as she has, but obviously there are foreign races to take into account. So she's perhaps not quite as unexposed as I'd sort of had in my mind. But she won that race at Doncaster well. She's obviously going the right way. She can, it looks like she can clearly improve. Farhar, I noted that all her wins have come with female jockeys. So the booking of Holly Doyle obviously could make a difference. Some horses certainly do seem to go better for different types of riders, regardless of what sex they are, to be fair. But I just feel that, Farhar, she got beaten by Alcázar in this race before, and actually the difference is considerably greater this time. And as I think, we've talked in previous programs, we do know quite a lot about her now, and I'm not sure that really there's much left to improve. I mean, Jadail, excuse me, obviously won very well last time, but these are better horses she's up against mostly this time. Tufan's had the benefit of that run. And I know James was very sweet on Tufan before that race, and he thought that was his winner. So, but to be fair, obviously Tufan was having his first start on grass. And all his runs last year, obviously virtually every horse last year, apart from ones that ran in the Derby and Goodwood, had to run on the all-weather. So I think that's something that you have to bear in mind in terms of looking at last year's form particularly. Luwa is the one that I'd like to see go forward. She's obviously only had 3 runs. She ran well at Doncaster. I know Phil's been itching to get her back on the grass, and that Newbury's obviously a track that's going to suit her very well. She's a big filly. She's long striding. I mean, it's, had we have been in a situation where Dubai Day was going ahead, the Hatter is made for her, isn't it, really? Of the ones down below, Labois, Phil's horses this year have always all looked like that they needed a run. And I think that was what put me off going for Labois in the selection. Put me off going for Luwa in the selection, and Labois obviously is I'm sure going to need a run, but it'd be interesting to see what she's like. She's a half sister to Ashjan, who won twice over a mile, but when you look at her dam Nijal Mori, although she's a half sister to No Risk Al Mori, she took 7 starts before she then won 2 mile-and-a-half races back to back. So you can't be looking to her to jump forward. I think at this stage it's going to be among the horses with ratings at the top of the list, really.
Yeah, it's just so difficult, isn't it, for the newcomers? Even in a maiden, you wouldn't necessarily consider those 3 newcomers up against horses with 1 or 2 starts. It just makes it so much difficult, so much harder in a conditions race when they're coming up against hardened handicappers. And I'm sure, granted a normal race program, Phil Collington and Steve Blackwell probably wouldn't even be considering debutant sending their horses out to make their debuts in this sort of race. So it's going to be a tough task, certainly for the newcomers.
Having said that, though, obviously this is partly down to the situation of this year, but at the end of the day, if these horses have got to run somewhere, and you might as well run on a nice, well-maintained Grade 1 track. And what a nice experience for a horse for its first race, really. And it's not as if this race hasn't been without that kind of runner before. I mean, we've had other horses such as Kayak and unfortunately the unfortunate run from Roswell, where unfortunately he broke down. But it's not, looking back through the stats of this race, we have had horses which are getting a bit more experience, and also horses from a lower rating such as Kamikaze's running it a few times. So it's not necessarily all about winning. And, at least this will give you a chance to rate those two horses. Steve has said that he thinks Aloof is a little bit backward, but, on breeding, she's going to be the first UK runner for Seraphine de Payon, who obviously you'll know quite a bit about his stock from the UAE and his runs out there and winning the Kahela Classic. Spirited Gay Madame is a half sister to Medaf Afba, who won the other version of this race in 2019. I can't possibly think that it's going to be ready to make an impact in this race, but nonetheless, it's that one, that of all the unexposed ones, I think that's probably the one which I'd like to see finishing a bit further up the field.
Yeah, it'd be interesting, won't it? I mean, I can remember Spirited Game running in the UK. You don't have to go back that far, really, I suppose, do you? She ran quite a lot at Newbury in those conditions races that we're talking about. May have actually run in this race, I think, or the equivalent of this race, and also the big handicaps as well. She was a regular in those type of races. But I was just looking back. I can actually remember the dam of the horse at the bottom, lap one, Ajal Mori, when she, as you point out, won her last two starts in her career, but she didn't win by very far. I remember her beating a horse called Foreign on one of those occasions, and I think Altes Cosset might have been the other one at Stratford, but she didn't win by very far. Let's put it that way. But she battled, in fairness. So it'll be interesting to see if that trait has been obviously it's debut, but it'll be interesting to see what kind of traits that the newcomer has picked up from her.
Just going back to Tufan, I think, it was only his third start at Doncaster, so it'd be too hard to be drawing firm conclusions from the run, but it was 1.5 miles, and stepping up from, 7 furlongs and a mile that he'd been running over on his first two starts. So there's every chance that this intermediate 10 furlongs is going to suit him a lot better than the 1.5 miles. I thought he probably travelled pretty well into the race, and maybe I wasn't as disappointed as Gary perhaps was with the run, albeit it was only a handicap off 89, so he's going to need to improve. But I just think it's great that you look down the list of runners and the jockeys that we've got in this race. Obviously Shadwell's first two jockeys are both there, Jim Crowley, Dane O'Neill, suggesting Alcázar and Lulu are the first two, and then to have Oisin Murphy, who was of course top jockey at Royal Ascot, and Holly Doyle on board Tufan and Farha, and even Jack Mitchell, he's been in good form on the Arabian so far this season. So it's I think encouraging that these professionals are obviously at the track anyway, but there's a willingness to ride these Arabians before they get into their thoroughbred mounts later on in the card.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously from a sponsorship point of view, although obviously you'd like to see a different or a slightly broader mix of ownership, certainly the quality of jockeys that we've got riding in this race will help draw the attention to the non-Arabian racing fans, as it were. And that certainly it looks like it's set up to be a good race. It should be quite competitive. The ones in the top half of the field certainly all have good form at and around this trip. So obviously I'm hoping for a good race. And Gary, you'll be commentating, won't you?
Yeah, I noticed most of them are in blue. All but one. Well, in fact, they're all got blue on them. All got blue on them, which is, I think, is a first. We've got the lesser seen yellow cap, which, excuse me, I think it's the seventh cap, isn't it? Eight or nine, I think, is the most I've had in one race before, which was the pink cap. I can't remember exactly, but
it's always the lucky pink cap.
Lucky pink cap, yeah. We've even had an orange cap in some of the races before, but
at least Phil Collington often makes it a bit easy for you because he's got these fancy nose bands and cheek pieces, different coloured cheek pieces that he puts on.
That does help, and obviously I think we've got one. Well, Carter always wears Hadgi Dudley and Tufan Farha have got the cheek pieces on for the first time as well, so that'll be something else to aid identification. And
we'll certainly not have. You'll not have. Are you coming to Windsor, Gary? Is that one of yours or?
Yep, I'll be at Windsor. Yeah.
Okay, so you won't have any trouble identifying people there because that'll be a 0 to 65 handicap a week today, Monday the 28th, I think it is, and that'll be run over 1.25 miles too.
Yeah, looking forward to it. I always enjoy the trips to Windsor. I mean, obviously it's slightly different as it is going anywhere at the moment. with the amount of people that will be there. But yeah, hopefully by this time next month we won't be saying that, because it's due to be the new, in inverted commas, Freedom Day, isn't it?
That remains to be seen, doesn't it? We'll look forward to the latest government announcement on racecourse attendance and how that affects us. Possibly even by the time we've run this race, who knows? As today was supposedly Freedom Day Mark 1, we'll just have to see what happens. Anyway, thank you very much to both of you. Looking forward to the race tomorrow, and we'll preview the Windsor race and review this race up next week.
Look forward to it.
No problem.
Cheers. Thanks, guys.